And welcome to the Game Dojo. This is episode 1. My name is Sen-Foong Lim, and we're here with the successful applicants for the Game Dojo. I'm just going to turn off this screen sharing here so you can see my lovely face. Hey, my name is Sen. I am a designer, game designer of many games. But here we're here today to actually talk to not me, but to three new designers who might have some designs under their belt, but have never really been published yet in the board game field. We have some people who might be published in other fields like role playing games, but this is their venture into tabletop from a board game or card game perspective. So we have with us Mr. Ryan Schoon. Ryan, can you introduce yourself, Lore Master?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Ryan, as he said, and it's actually Schoon, like school,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's really commonly mispronounced. So I've been writing and designing role playing games for the past 5 years, and I've kind of always just had this board game idea brewing, just throughout that whole time, and this happened just coincidentally to show up on my radar right when I was, starting to really focus on that. So it just seemed like a good match. I'm ready to take what I've learned from designing RPGs and really put that towards board gaming.
hmm So it's Schoon like schooner.
Yeah, it is right like that.
Excellent. All right. And we also have Bob Wyman. Bob, introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, I'm a math professor in Virginia, and I've been a longtime board gamer for quite a while. I've had a couple of vague design ideas, but needed a couple of jump starts, and one of the jump starts was a colleague from philosophy came to me and said, "Look, I floated this idea when there was a conference about a zombie game to teach environmental sustainable resource management. And you're apparently the board game guy on campus, so make me, a game." And that was a great motivator, and I was actually able to throw something together, but it clearly needs more.
Well, excellent. I'm looking forward to that as a college professor myself. I'm super interested in, you know, game-based learning, gamification, all those, buzzwords that we use in the field. But also because of zombies, so that'll be fun. Looking forward to that. Ryan, looking forward to hearing your take on narratology and how you plan on bridging the gap between the two tabletop systems, really,
Yeah.
right? From role playing to board gaming. And then we have Devin here as well. Devin, tell us about yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Devin. I've been tinkering with game design for years now, since junior high, making games here and there. The last few years, I've been more pushing myself to get something solid done, something more complete. So I've had a few games that have gone through prototyping up to pitching, and then haven't quite ever found a home for any of them. So we'll see. The hardest problem for me that I've had was that I have trouble iterating quickly on something and forcing myself to iterate on something. Think about it and I'll think of what can be done better, but I never actually do it. So I'm hoping this will be a good kick in the pants to get that done for this one. It's a fun, I have a good mechanic for a time travel game, and we're going to see how that works.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I picked Devin as well, is because I like time travel. And Jay and I have been trying for years to make a time travel game, and we've never done it either. So if Devin can do it, more power to him. Devin also holds the illustrious position of being the only person I've actually ever played a prototype of. Devin also comes to the Gathering of Friends where we met a couple of years ago. So I played one of his prototypes. We just talked about it before we went on air. And I think, this process will help you in terms of iteration and getting the game to the table, getting it off the table, making some changes, and coming back. So the constant kind of, I hope to play like a Jiminy Cricket, where I'm on your shoulder and saying, "Hey, Devin, what about that game?" And you say, "Oh yeah, that game. I'll get to it." And then you say, "Oh my God, I'm on air next week. I better do something," right? So that's it. And
Yeah.
Ryan brought up something important, that we actually are missing one of the members of the show. So our fourth designer is Steve Kyres, who is designing a game called Han Solo, which is a single player Is it a single play? I think it's a solo game,
Yeah.
and it's all played with a deck of cards in your hand. Hence the name Han Solo, and obviously there's some trophy things based on that in terms of your role and what you're trying to do is escape from a planet, I think, as a smuggler and become a pirate and whatnot. And so there's some cool stuff there that I'm really interested in solo games as well, trying to design a couple with some of my design partners. So that's why Steve's project interested me as well. So if you don't know anything about what we're doing here, is we're really, really, really trying to help designers who are not published yet, well, get their games to a state that's better than it is today. And if that leads to publication, that's a wonderful thing. It doesn't have to, but maybe it will. And I think between myself and Jay and Daryl and Jesse and everybody that we know in the industry, um, we can make something happen for you where we get it one step closer to where it is you want to be after you get it designed to the point where you want it. But let's talk about your actual games. So you said a little bit about what they are, but Ryan, your game I actually saw and was starting to make comments on just on Facebook, right? The wonders of the internet
Oh
before
yeah.
it ever happened, right?
That's
Tell us
true.
about it.
So it's called First Responders Incorporated, and the game takes place in the not too distant future, where the government basically has its hands full to the point where it started to privatize emergency responders.
Hmm.
So the game is for 4 players, up to 4 players, and each player takes on the role of one of these corporations. And so they kind of maintain their own set of police, medical, and fire response vehicles. And I have some. Do you want me to share my screenshots?
Yeah, yeah. Share the screenshot. That'd be awesome.
All right, give me 1 second here. So if you see here,
Hmm.
it's kind of put on a board. Everybody has their own. You can kind of see, medical, fire, and police vehicles that they can upgrade throughout the game.
Hmm.
And your whole goal is to, and there's to auction, to bid on cards that you can use to upgrade your fleet, to play action cards that help you or hurt your opponents.
Hmm.
And there's some more pictures there. And basically, your goal is to get these vehicles out onto the board to complete crises. And here's an image of the game in progress. So basically, you have to kind of work together to solve these, crises that might come up, like fires, arson, just medical emergencies, and things like that. If you let the city get too out of control, the government will pull your funding completely and
Hmm.
call it a failed experiment. So there is a little bit of a cooperative side to this, and also that's to keep the game from stalling, because it often takes more than one person to try to resolve these crises. It might be my police car and Sen's fire truck. So it's basically people make money, and then at the end of the game, the amount of money whoever has the most is said to get the contract for the city and win the game.
Okay. And my favorite part is the very, very big $1 million, but no.
Yeah, those.
Uh,
Yep.
so Devin, sorry, Devin, Ryan, did you get those trucks specifically for today?
I did. I mean,
You're hilarious.
I did. I mean, not specifically for today, but I mean, I wanted the play test. Obviously, you can tell I'm using the tiles from Zombies, which it just worked well for what I was doing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
perfect, right?
I needed the pieces because I want to start playtesting it, for real. So I needed them anyway. It just seemed like a good time to pick them up.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So, Ryan's saying that, in order to play test, you need to actually have real things on the table. And as you can see here in the video, in the screenshot,
I can go.
oh, he just turned it off. Way to go, Ryan.
I'll bring it
Uh,
back.
Thanks.
Sorry.
In the screenshot, he's using tiles from another game, from Zombies! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark!
Yep.
From Twilight Creations, and using those just to give him the infrastructure of the city that he needs, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a wonderful way. We all cannibalize all our old games and whatnot in order to get things to the table faster. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you got to start somewhere, right? And I think that's where being able to just say, "Screw it, we're gonna do it." and putting it on the table is something that's important. Devin, I think you're muted, but if you can unmute for a sec.
Yep.
Do you find it difficult to get your games onto the table? I know you have problems with iteration, you're saying, but is it the prototyping that makes it problematic for you?
Sometimes, yes. I tend to be more finicky with the layout for graphic design of like cards in particular. A lot of my games involve a lot of cards, and getting the layout, the stuff put on them takes a long time. But
Right.
actually getting them to the table once I have a prototype is usually not very hard. I have a bunch of groups that help me out.
Okay, so then for you, the limiting factor is actually doing the hard work, or part of the hard work, which is the creation of it. And
Yes,
is that because you're a perfectionist?
to a degree.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I know what Ryan does, and I know what Bob does, but I can't remember what you do for your job, your day job.
Job, I do quality control and inventory for Living Good Medical. It's
Okay. So being a perfectionist is probably part of your job.
to a degree, yep.
To a degree. Well, I'd hope so with medical equipment, right? So there's some personality there, right, as well. I guess I think it's funny because I'm very much the perfectionist as well. I finish games in my head, and this is problematic, right? Because if I can finish them in my head, they never need to reach the table. And so having a partner like Jay, who's much more a doer than I am, he'll say, no, we have to make it and try it because it's probably not gonna work like you think, and he's entirely right. And so it is important to just kind of sometimes say close is good enough and just get it to the table, right? Devin, tell us about your game.
So my game is time travel. Right now the theme is you're working for some company, and on a cargo run, basically you're ripped out of the time stream and you crash land in this strange steampunk world. And you have to make contacts and manipulate the political world to fix your time machine and get out. So broken time machine is necessary because you have limited capability to go back.
Right.
And then the game is driven around a hand of character cards. I can hold up one, see if it will work for the camera.
Yeah,
So like, you have the suit and the value, a couple action icons. Each one has two, and then name, little flavor blurb, and one action on it. So there are 4 different guilds, and each guild will have a certain set, valued 1 to 7 and a 9, and then some dual faction ones. Basically, each turn you're playing out a card and taking an action. Once everyone's played a card to one of these boards, at the end of the round, it shifts down, and then a new empty board replaces it. Any resources that were there are placed on the new present board. And on future turns,
you're shifting in time.
You can play cards to previous boards, and then the changes from that will ripple forward to the next 2. So there are always 3 game states, basically, and you can alter the overall game state at any one of those points to get what you need to get.
So that kind of takes a lot of thinking, right?
It is a thinky game.
How one thing's going to affect the other things, right?
Here, I got a screenshot from the playtest I did last.
Okay, so yeah, I see the 3 boards Thursday. There. So one of those past, present, and future?
Present, and then past, and farther past.
Oh, okay. And basically. Then like 2 versions past. Okay.
In order to play to the previous boards, you have to spend a resource, the quantum, I was calling it, those little blue things you see at the top of their player mats.
Right.
So you only have a limited supply of it, and it vanishes pretty quickly. And if you change too much, you get paradox, which then limits your ability to store quantum and takes up a lot of space.
Okay, so quantum is the power that you're using to send yourself or to change things further back in time to hopefully make it actually better for you in the present.
Yep.
Okay, and then the paradox is what happens if
you try to undo things that you can't undo.
Right, and then that messes up with your flux capacitor or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Okay, got it. And nothing in this game about going 88 miles an hour or anything? Not yet?
No.
Okay. All right, Bob. Let's talk about zombies.
Zombies.
Yeah.
I did an Unpub mini a year ago, and one of the people's things I like about the game was zombies! Exclamation point. That's all they need. The more so the problem was presented to me as, I want a zombie game. It has to involve environmental sustainability.
Okay.
And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, most of the zombie stories, the zombies aren't the thing. It's the zombie apocalypse has arrived, and then it's how you interact with the humans and not betray each other, or work together to. And the zombies are just sort of presenting a decay of society, and you have to, with your team, get resources, protect yourselves, maybe get to some safer location. And so I went with that, and I managed to get a game going that was quicker, about a half an hour, something that I could try to explain and get students to play in a class period. That was, go to different locations, think about how you would respond to a disaster like a zombie apocalypse, and try to get resources and work together to sustain yourselves for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But the base sort of thing I had, if you can sort of, I borrowed the artwork from Dead of Winter, and then just simplified it because I didn't want to print a bunch of cards. I just said, okay, I've got tokens for a few resources, and when you go to a location, you can roll a die. You're going to find something, and base it off of that. So people were moving around, getting resources. Zombies were coming after them, so they had to sort of protect themselves somewhat. But predominantly was about food. How do you manage to keep yourselves fed through this? The problem I had was that it was really good on the exploitation of resources and did not a lot getting towards the idea of sustainable resources or renewable resources.
Right.
But I think the big step forward is to have these locations, like you start in a grocery store, but there's going to be demand in the grocery store. Eventually you're going to run out of everything in the grocery store, and it's going to become overrun. So you have to explore and go somewhere new. And so have the locations themselves be a resource that you're turning over, as some of them age out on their own. Some of them will age if you abandon them. So you have to maintain your the locations you care about.
Right. And so the sustainability part, is that going to come from, are the players ever going to like make a farm, or?
So the inspiration, because it's at my school is a land grant university. It's got a farm on it. It's got an ag school. And one of the things that was frustrating to us is that when we talked to the kids after this game, none of them, we made it all about food. We showed them a fast food location where the food went bad after a couple of rounds.
Interesting.
And they still, none of them thought, well, let's go farm some food. let's grow it.
Interesting, because at a fast food joint, the food actually wouldn't go that bad.
Well, it depends on if your freezer keeps running, it won't go bad for a long time. So we had I sort of had this sort of event happen where the first few days happen, and then on day 3, this location loses power.
Right.
And so all of the food is going to go at the end of this turn.
So was it like almost like a moderated semi role playing ish event-ish thing around a classroom?
So we'd run it in, I wouldn't call it role playing ish. I gave player powers, but they're very basic. They were really just to differentiate. But the idea we'd have is that we'd get the kids to learn the game, and then we'd have a sort of a post-mortem where we'd try to say, look, we don't just want you to play a game in class. We want you to think about what this might mean for you. If there was
learning outcomes, right?
Exactly.
Learning outcomes. That thing we're supposed to do.
Right. It's what you're supposed to do. So you have this post-mortem or reflection period where you tried to get them to talk about, whether working together is something that's important, whether these other things are something that's important. And we were surprised to find that the farm didn't come up. So there will be a farm, and the way the farm will work is it doesn't start with any resource tokens. But if you stay there,
it'll gain
it
them
can
as
develop
you stay.
resource tokens on its own without
You
effort.
got to defend it and barricade it, just like in Walking Dead.
Well, and I've never seen Walking Dead, but the more I thought about it, the more we thought about it talking, a lot of zombie stuff, and Walking Dead's a good example, is really about, if you don't have the standard norms of society, how do you construct your society?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. People on the feed. So Josh Fosbury is saying it sounds like a mega game, and that's what it kind of sounded like to me at first. So do you think you can boil that down to a tabletop experience where you can play in an hour?
Well, it has been that. It's been a half-hour game. The twist sort of case was when we had it in a classroom, we'd play one game, I would alter the game, and they'd play it the second time. So I would make twists, and the farm idea came out because instead of having depersonalized locations like police station, when we gave them names of university locations, the students really responded to. Yeah.
Interesting. So Ryan, Devin, come back into the conversation here.
Yeah.
Any questions that you guys have for each other? What did anything interest you in what anybody was saying?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a question for Bob. That sounds like a really cool idea, and if you haven't seen Walking Dead, maybe watch it, just because I mean, literally, like, that's, there was a group of survivors, and that was literally their thing, was if we can live on a farm, if we can sustain ourselves, then we can outlive whatever's going on. But when the outside world comes, to the farm, it kind of messes everything up for them a little bit. And so in the game that you're making, I mean, is the goal to pick a location, stay there as long as you can, or do you have groups spread out? I mean, you have a board or a table set up where you have 5 or 6 locations, at once.
You have the second one. You got 5 or 6 locations at once. If you start to hunker down in one place with everybody there, 2 bad things will happen. You'll lose access to the other locations, because the idea of if you don't maintain your pathways, so to speak, you won't be able to get back to those other places. And it's got a similar mechanic to Dead of Winter, where the zombies will just show up where you are. And so at the end of every round, you're going to have to fight off some zombies. And the more of you are clustered in one place, the more zombies there are going to be there. My thought currently is that the style, what you're going to need to do is kind of go through the deck of locations, some of which you're going to throw away or exploit quickly, but some of which you realize you got to keep until you've got a working network, or sort of a compound, if you like, of a few locations that you're exploiting combos off of, so that you can maintain those.
Okay.
And
go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was just, what you just touched on there a little bit when you said compound building, but is there other add-ons to locations? I mean, if I want to put walls around my farm, or, connect the fast food restaurant and, the school cafeteria or whatever, I mean, are there ways to do that, to like build your own little like city almost?
There's and just not really. I should say no. I was thinking about, and I haven't come up with, whether to make going to a new place more hazardous than passing back and forth between places that you've already established a presence at. So that's a little bit like connecting those things, but I've purposely stayed away from kind of fortifying a location, because I'm not sure if it'll become too easy to hunker down then.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Like, I wonder if there's multiple paths to victory yet, or if you have, because and that's the hard thing about a teaching game. Sometimes with teaching game, you have to have, well, this is what we want to teach, so that should be the thing that wins, right? So the balance between the teaching objective and multiple paths to victory to make it a game that people will want to replay as opposed to just play once and get, oh, I got the gist of the learning thing. I never need to play it again. So it's interesting because, you know, like what Ryan's saying, you know, if you hunkered down and then built a city, you could actually outlast until, you know, maybe X or Y happens. And when X and Y happen, then you realize that, oh, I need to go out and reclaim some of the things, but they're all overrun. So I think there's pros and cons to each of those in terms of the the real world notion of getting overrun by zombies, if that is a thing. But in a gameplay situation, I think as well, you have to be concerned from a design standpoint about will people play the game again once they figure out that this is the only way to win because that's how it's designed. So I would caution you on just thinking about, hey, what about other ways
Yeah.
to win?
I
Right?
definitely want multiple paths to victory, even if, you know, one of the messages you get is this, you know, running something sustainable is a good idea in the game. That doesn't mean that there is only, you must go to the farm. I don't want that to be the option.
Right.
So it's
How about-
cooperative, though. It's cooperative, right?
Yes.
It is. It's fully cooperative, and at least in its primal state, I want to make sure that it is tight. 30 minutes is a pretty hard, you know, to get it to be something that's in a class. If you could have that be the start mode and then play 2 having expanded options, that would be great. But I want to make sure I can get that half-hour experience down.
Right. How long are your class sessions? Or the
50
class session?
minutes usually. So,
Okay,
you know,
yeah.
a class hour is not quite an hour.
No, because you need
And
to bridge in, bridge out, and then let them run to the next class.
right. And ideally you want a game done that you know, I told you to read the directions for this game, but I know some of you didn't. So
Right, exactly. Yeah. Devin, what problems have you run into so far on the time? Does the time travel game have an actual name?
It didn't. I was calling it just time. It was Time Tricks because it was originally a trick-taking game.
Oh, okay.
So with the new theme, it's whatever I end up naming this fictional city that I'm setting.
Oh, right. Okay. So
Illyria, I think.
oh, yes, that's what you're saying.
towards.
Does Illyria do? What kind of problems have you run into in Illyria, and how have you solved them so far?
The biggest problem was having just enough information presented such that it would be interesting and there would be fun combos, but not too much to overwhelm, because like I said, there are 3 different boards and you have to look at all 3 of them, and there are a lot of choices that you have. So figuring out ways of limiting those options while still in meaningful ways has been the hard part.
And what did you do to solve that?
Well, the previous iteration, I had too many numbers, and so variable numbers on each card was a bit too much to track. So this would produce 3 of this resource, or 1 of this resource. Whereas now it's just tied to your machine itself.
Oh, okay.
So centralizing all of that, lowering the total number of things on the boards.
And that helped to constrain the decision space for the
taking
player.
actions out. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the next thing you think is that you know maybe is problematic that you want to take a look at?
Scoring has always been hard for me, and especially in like a sort of a mid-weight Euro like this, Euro-ish. I've never done anything like that, and so trying to balance that so that you have different paths to victory that are reasonably well balanced.
Right. So it's not just a race to be the first person to do X, right? Okay. So you want it to have some granular scoring system by which at the end, you know, the person who won should have done the most work.
Yeah.
Had the most fun.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It kind of has like everything you do, a lot of different things you do can give you points, and it's maximizing those points. It was just skewed a little too heavily in favor of the remains of the trick-taking part, which was when you resolve a board, whoever contributed the most to that guild, whichever guild had the most strength there, whoever contributed to that gets influence with them. At the end of the game,
And is there still trick-taking in the game?
No. It's just that sort of faint.
Okay.
You resolve 4 cards, and of those 4 cards, you'll get a certain number of points if you won.
That particular board.
Yeah, winning being
And
a lot more than.
Yeah, and how do you win that board? Is it by the value of your contribution,
Yeah.
or
So if someone played a red 7 and a red 2,
Okay.
and there's a green 5 and a blue 6, red team
The red
wins.
7.
So whoever played the red 7 gets 3 point influence. Red 2 gets 1 influence.
Okay.
So,
And this is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players, 3 to 4.
I think that's the other issue with it. It's probably 4 players with. I can set up an AI system for 3 and 2 that would reasonably
really?
well work, but just the way it works, it'd be hard to imagine it working as well with fewer players.
Right, because I mean, most trick-taking games you can't play with less than 3, right? And even then, it's usually cutthroat variant. Okay, interesting. So it's not quite trick-taking, but because it has some trick-taking elements, then we're going to be looking at the problem or the interesting the opportunity to solve that issue. Okay, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
Ryan.
Yes.
What problems have you been having with your
problems. Okay. Well, I mean, just a lot of I don't know that they're problems, but just a lot of difficulty I had narrowing down my ideas.
game? Okay. Well, because you're a world builder first and foremost, right?
Right. I guess I mean, honestly, that is most of what I do is writing. That's where the lore master came from. When I first started writing role-playing games, it was mostly setting, lore, and world building and things like that. So, but when it came to the game design, just how movement was handled, what's too far, what's too little, and the cost to benefit ratio on cards is still driving me up the wall. I still think maybe some things are too expensive for the benefit they give. Other things are maybe even game-breakingly cheap.
Right.
So that's just kind of resolving itself as it goes. And
Yeah,
honestly,
that'll come out. Yeah.
it took me a long time to figure out a good way of indicating which vehicle was owned by which person, which is how I finally ended up with the trucks that carry the cubes in the back.
And the cubes are your player color?
Yeah, the cubes are your player color. So like when you look and you're black, you're looking for all the black cubes, so you can tell where your vehicles are, because there's a little bit of to keep track of, because there's so many people's pieces moving around the board at once.
And this is a 2 to 4 player, 3 to 4 player?
It's 2 to 4 player right now.
Okay.
And I think honestly the biggest challenge I had when you lay out the board, there's 36 tiles. I worry that might be a little too big, but I needed a method for when you draw a crisis of knowing where to place it.
Oh,
and
so you did D6
so I settled
by D6.
Right. So I settled on 2d6. Okay. One is a number, one is a letter.
Yeah.
So you can kind of make the grid. And so I had to kind of up the speed of some things to make up for the fact that the grid is now 6 by 6.
Okay, and that's where your economy of scale is going to could go awry. Okay, I see what you're doing. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, and even with 2 players, it's still a 6 by 6 grid. Like the space doesn't get any smaller with 2 players because there's more. Since there's only going to be 2 players competing over the same number of cards, you'll get more cards.
Yeah.
You'll get so it should scale pretty well, but I mean, we'll see.
Yeah. So these are all problems that I think, those are definitely things that'll work themselves out through playtesting. Like you'll find that people will never play a certain card because it's too expensive, right?
Yeah.
Or people will just complain about the speed of the ambulance because, like, man, this thing doesn't, just putters. It's like, look at that police car. It's like turbocharged compared to this ambulance, right? And so I think a lot of that will come out in playtesting. But we have some guys on this panel who are mathy people who might be able to help you out and take a look at your spreadsheets. Are you using spreadsheets to balance stuff?
Only kind of.
And that's okay. I think it's okay to only kind of use them.
I am, but I don't like. It's very new to me, so I have it all laid out in a spreadsheet. But then I was looking at it, and I'm like, I can't correlate this at all. I was staring at it, and I spent some time making it, but I was like, this doesn't I don't know where to draw.
Yeah. And you
Since
made that spreadsheet. That's funny
yeah,
because for me, when I see a spreadsheet that one of my design partners makes, it's like you're speaking a foreign language. Spreadsheets are so intimate in how they're designed. I don't like to touch other people's spreadsheets.
and I mean
It's like
I
touching
understand how the
something.
information like I presented the information in a certain way, but when you're looking at say like victory points,
Hmm.
so you I have it broken down by number of vehicles required, but that could be one police car, two fire trucks, and three ambulances. And that's totally different from having five police cars, considering there are upgrades that actually, increase the abilities of your vehicle. So one meeple might actually represent three cop cars or four cop cars instead of just one.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay. Yeah.
so
Like a
when you look
fleet.
at right, like a fleet. So when you're looking at five, like a difficulty of five cop cars versus a difficulty of three cop cars, two fire trucks, even though they both need five vehicles, it's a totally different number of meeples. So trying to figure out how many victory points each one of those should be worth is it's hurting my brain basically.
A lot of that is cost analysis, right?
Yeah,
It's seeing how much did you pay for that, how much should it be worth, and then how much and there's a little bit of feel. So typically, and Bob's going to hate me for saying this, but I usually start a spreadsheet, and I will make everything balance perfectly, and then we play the game and we throw the spreadsheet out. Well, not really. We still use a spreadsheet, but we nudge things here and there by factors. We use a factoring system a lot of times to, especially with like collectible card games type things, um, because people intrinsically will know that that should be worth so many this or that in terms of economy. So they'll know that, oh, if I do that, that 7 point victory condition card or whatever should be worth the equivalent of two cop cars and one fire truck or something like that, right? And if it isn't, if it takes more than that, they'll say, I'll never do that. Or that's really expensive to do that, but I guess it's the only thing left, so I'll do it. And so sometimes balance is not the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to unbalance stuff to make other things actually be more impressive and more powerful, right? I mean, in Magic, the Gathering, which is, your classic example of power creep, you know, the ones that, if you reduce the cost but keep the power level high, everybody's going to want that card. Therefore, you increase the rarity of it, et
yeah.
cetera, right? So there's ways to manage a lot of that. You just got to figure it out. And some of that will definitely come out through playtesting. How many playtests have you done at that game so far?
Just me and my wife. I
Okay.
haven't publicly taken it out, but actually tomorrow I think will be its public debut at
Nice.
my local game store.
Oh,
So
that's great. And
yeah,
what does your wife think?
well, she like I actually brought her in at the beginning, just to get her input. I wanted her to kind of to be a part of the process, at least to be a sounding board for
For
ideas and
sure.
things like that. So, um, she's not nearly as big of a gamer as I am. This is a little bit outside of her wheelhouse, but she's been really supportive. I mean, she likes it, and
Yeah.
that's for me that's a badge of honor, considering she doesn't really like non-competitive or non-cooperative games too
Yeah.
much.
And she's not telling
So,
you that just because she likes you.
I mean, who knows? I don't know if you're married, but you'll never know the answer to that question.
I am married, and I never know the answer. You're right. Devin, how about you? How have your playtests been going?
They've gone pretty well. I've had two so far.
Okay,
After the first one, I basically cut out half of the game because I
good.
had shot way too far ahead.
Yeah, keep
Um,
cutting.
yeah, that's the plan. But this last one went pretty well. Um, Sitting right around the time I'm looking at. It's not a short game. It's probably 90-ish minutes.
Okay,
90
so it's a 90-minute
minutes.
game that has to be played with 4 players, but no more and no less.
I mean, I think less can be doable, but
Okay, less can be
with
doable, but do you think
basically
it'll be
variants.
okay? And so, I mean, we've heard from a lot of people over the past couple of weeks about rule books and variant rules and player counts and being honest about player counts. So that is one thing you want to consider is, if it can't be played with that number without a rules clutch or an AI or a weird app or something, is that really something you want to say that's what it is? There are companies out there. There's some very strange little companies out there that will publish games that can only be played with 8. You know, that kind of stuff. It
Yeah.
exists, right? Um, so think about it. Think about how you can get it to 3 human players. I think that is
I mean, I haven't tested it.
definitely a goal, right? But it
Yeah.
depends on what your goal is with it, Devin. So I'm going to ask you straight up: is your goal to get this particular game published, or is your goal to say I made this game and it's cool, but it can only be played with 4?
I mean, I would like it to be the best it can be, and usually
Right.
the best it can be involves playing with multiple player counts, because otherwise
Yeah.
it won't ever get played.
Yes.
So I think 3 to 4 is doable. 2 seems a little bit like of a stretch right now
Yeah.
in my head, and would require some fudging.
Yeah. They usually do. It
Yeah.
usually doesn't work quite so well as you think it
So,
was. And
but-
from your playtest, what has been the one piece of feedback that has really stuck with you so far?
They were all, well, between the 2, so I cut half the game out and then played the again in the iteration. And all of the players, which are various skill levels in terms of their game experience, could follow what was happening.
Okay, and were
And
they
that was-
the same
they
people
were
that played version A and version
previously?
B?
No,
Okay.
they hadn't played earlier. But the fact that all of them would have plans and would generally know what they wanted to do was reassuring.
Okay. And Bob, you had a question that was for Devin earlier.
Yes.
Go ahead and ask.
Well, because you guys were talking about spreadsheeting, and I was wondering, you've got cards, and I was wondering how many different kinds of currency sort of you had to work with. You've got the different kinds of vehicles.
Oh, it's to Ryan.
That's
Okay.
for Ryan.
Oh, sorry, that was to Ryan. I'm really curious about Devin's
Okay.
game, but I'm convinced that if I don't play it, I'm not going to understand.
I have a spreadsheet.
Well, yeah, so you're asking me about currency then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Because we don't really, I mean, there's money obviously in the game, but when you say currency, you're referring to like the vehicles on the table, right?
Or the things that you need to balance against each other.
I mean, there's a lot of different things. Like I said, I mean, the basis is, we have the 3 different, you can think of them as factions: the medical, the fire, and the police. And since every different card requires a varying amount of each one of those, and some players might have, they might have upgraded to the epic big fire truck that actually counts as 4 smaller fire trucks. That one player is in a better position to do fire, but I have to balance and make sure that big fire truck is cheaper or more beneficial than just having 4 small fire trucks. At the same time, like, I don't want them to just be able to waltz around the board, destroying everyone else because they happen to get that one upgrade. So that's, I mean, like Sen said, that's stuff that's gonna have to come out in playtesting. But figuring out a way for me to break it down for like a cost per vehicle to figure out how many victory points it should be, that's very difficult.
Well, it sounds like it's the classic thing where, like you say, it should be cheaper to get a super truck than to get 4 trucks.
Mhm.
But the price you pay is that you're fixed on fires now, right? That
Right.
person is a little bit gambling that that the crises that are gonna come up are gonna feed the strategy they committed to.
And you're looking at you're slightly more beneficial. Oh, definitely more beneficial because you're only moving 1 vehicle now. You don't have to take 4 actions to move 4 vehicles. So there's that benefit as well. And so all of that has to figure out, be incorporated into how expensive it should be.
Mhm.
Yeah. Interesting. There's a lot of interesting dynamics in just what you're talking about. And eventually, I think it'd be helpful to see all the cards we're talking about in
Yeah.
terms of what does it look like, what are we going with, and whatnot. Robert Nolan is on the feed, just congratulating you all on being accepted into the dojo, so that's good. Thanks, Robert. Robert writes for a magazine, and he's also an aspiring game designer, so
Cool.
following along. Um, Bob, how about you? In terms of playtesting, you've played it in your classrooms. Have you played it outside the classroom?
Yes, I did a. So first we played it in the classroom. Uh, I tried it a few times to make sure before that, um, with my wife because good
You know,
feedback.
yeah.
But then after that, I did an Unpub mini. So
Right.
it was
Yes.
predominantly gamers just sort of walking in, and I was very nervous that it was going to be, too focused. I was really worried at the outset that these were students that you don't know what their game background is. I had
Hmm.
to assume that a lot of them had not had some sort of experience where you've got multiple different actions to choose from. I didn't want to give them too many things to stare at and freeze up.
Right.
And then putting it in front of gamers, some of the feedback that I got from that was really good because I didn't know how to respond to it. But part of it was one person highlighted how much chance was in the game. That was, you go to a location, you roll a die, and you find out what happens. And he was a much more strategic guy. He would have way preferred some what they call sort of pre-randomness or random front loaded randomness, where
Yeah.
maybe he got to
Yeah.
roll first and then decide what he did with
So input
his
random.
input
Input
instead of
random.
output.
Yeah.
Because it turned out, and I was like, you're right, there's a lot of output randomness in this game. And the other thing that they focused, or two things that sort of highlighted to me, was they wanted the geography to matter more, like how the locations are relative to each other.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes towards Ryan's point about building a city or connecting food point A to food point B. Now you got superfood, right, or whatever.
Right. And I think that made made an impact. And one person said, I love rolling all the dice. That's the thing I like the best. The thing I like the least is I feel like my decisions were too easy and not meaningful enough.
Hmm.
And I and 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 I think that they were right. I mean, on the one hand, it sounds like you want randomness, but you want decision making. But you do want meaningful decisions, and I want the decisions to be more meaningful than just, well, most of the food's over there, I'm going to go there.
Hmm. And I think that kind of pressure comes from the other parts of the games in terms of what challenges the other decks or whatever cards or like you said, like the events that come up at random, like the power's out in this block of the city, so all the food there depletes or rots
Right.
or whatever. I think that kind of stuff, those pressures might help. You guys have any thoughts on Bob's zombie problem is coming up with here in terms of how to make the decisions meaningful, how to maybe have some input randomness, so stuff where the dice roll isn't just the dice roll, where you have some control either before or after to mitigate it, right? Any thoughts?
I mean, I don't want to keep comparing your game to Dead of Winter because I know it's not Dead of Winter, but you sound like you're familiar with it. And I mean, what they do is, they put there's a clock on the game, and the clock changes based on which scenario you're doing. But there is a clock, and so every decision matters because every action is one less action you're going to get to take in the game.
Hmm.
So if you spend too much time taking actions that don't contribute overall, like you can tell that your actions aren't having the effect you want them to have like pretty early. So I think if you want people's actions to feel like they matter, I mean, like there should be some sort of obvious, maybe not a penalty, but when they do an action that isn't, pushing the game forward, it should be obvious. And then they're going to go, oh, shoot, I'm going the wrong direction. You know, the next turn they do a different action that pushes the game forward, and they're like, okay, I solved that little piece of the puzzle. And I think that's, that's the hard part about game design,
Right.
making people feel like their actions matter. But if you can tell every time they do, the right action, that it pushes them one step closer to victory, like then they're going to feel rewarded, for making those actions.
Yeah, it's kind of the pedagogical carrots and sticks, Bob, where
Right.
if you do if you do frequent low stakes testing, you know, you might actually get the results you want in terms of like, and it's exactly what Ryan's saying. If you have a storyline, say a scenario storyline written out where you have by time tick A, you need to have whatever, and time tick B, you need to have whatever in terms of amount of food. Let's say it's food. So even if they don't pass time tick A, it doesn't mean they can't pass time tick B. They can still get their result there that they need. They just know they have to do more than what they're doing, right? If
Right.
you want to push them in a certain direction, they kind of need a metric to follow, a rubric to follow, or whatever, a guideline. And so, I mean, survival being the overall thing is good, but to get a meaningful decision in game, you know, those say goals that you lay out in a row and say these are the things you have to accomplish, you know, by the end of turn one, by the end of turn two, or round one, round two, whatever it is, then that might give the players a little more of a guideline in terms of what actions to take, and they'll know pretty certain, like Ryan was saying, whether or not they've done it. And if they haven't done it, it doesn't mean they fail the whole game. It just means that they didn't get that particular objective, right?
Yeah,
So maybe that might work.
I think I've included some mechanics that sort of drive them a little bit, but I hadn't thought of it as an overall. Are you rewarding them for a good idea? Are you punishing them for a bad idea? I was just doing something that made it, you know, you've got to get off of this space because it's dying, kind of thing. You know, sort
Yeah,
of
and I think
moved
that
it a little bit,
that
but that
that
didn't keep it
does
open.
that does do the punishment part and the reward part, because the players are still alive or whatever. It might need to be more guided. I don't know.
But I want to chip in really quick too.
Yeah.
So when you put a player in a situation like that, where it's, hey, you have to get off this space or you die and it's going to be bad, you are, I mean, in that case, their action doesn't mean anything because
Right.
they only have one action. They have to move. But if there is a choice, okay, I know I need to leave, so I should leave. But if I stay, I might die, but also maybe I do this thing that really helps the whole team. Then they actually have a choice. And 90% of the time, they're probably just going to move because that's the safe thing to do and they don't want to die. But if there is that 10%, especially late in the game, where they're like, this is the moment, you know, where I'm going to risk it, like they always feel like they have that option and they always have an action to take. You know, they don't feel railroaded into always moving on.
Right. And the idea I had was, you know, you start like you were sort of saying with a clock. The first look, you start with you're in one location, and you can explore multiple locations from where you are, but there's a clock on the location you start on, and you've only got a few turns before it disappears. When it disappears, you're in the wild, and sort of like you said, you're not going to die, but you're putting yourself at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sort out, you know, how long do I want to stay here? Do we want to just send one person out to do some exploring to find one place to go, or do we send a couple of people out to give us some options for where we go next?
Right.
But I think that you're dead on. I need to think of it as sort of come up with a story arc that they could be playing through, and decide whether I'm helping them or not, guiding them that way.
I have a quick question. Bob, and this is going to seem off topic, but it's not. Have you played that new Star Trek game, Star Trek Ascendancy?
No, I just viewed it.
Okay.
If you have I've played Fleet Captains.
Okay, well, I actually haven't played that one. But in Ascendancy, every player starts on a planet, and every planet has a number of connections that can be linked to other planets. So, you know, if you're on one planet, it might have two paths. You don't know where those paths go, but when you do find another planet, you know, and you explore and you find another planet, it's linked to it. So every planet has, you know, X number of places you can leave. I think that might be a game that you'd want to maybe take a look at because you have to make a decision. You know, the planet you start on might only have 2 exits. And then the planet you go to might have the ability to go to 3 different places or maybe even just one place. And I think if you figure out, you know, because if you can just go anywhere at any time on the board, that might be a little more overwhelming, actually,
Yes.
because there's too many options. But the way they do it, I think, is smart in that it kind of restricts your options, you know, a lot.
Hmm. Devin, how about you in terms of your game? Where are you going next? What do you think it's going to be next for you?
Um, I'll need to get another couple playtests of the current version, I think, before I'll know
Okay.
that for sure.
Okay. And you do you have any ideas what you want to playtest? When you go into a playtest, do you have a goal?
Yeah, I'll usually have one or two things that I'm looking for specifically. So next time it's going to be scoring and whether the end
Okay.
game feels better than it did.
Okay. So looking at scoring as your next goal. How about you, Ryan? What's your next goal for tomorrow night's
Yeah.
first time ever live at which store? Which store is it going to
Uh,
be at?
it's gonna be at Family Time Games, which is a local store here in Indianapolis
Awesome.
that I
And
love.
so at Family Time Games tomorrow, at some point in
Yes,
time, Ryan will
tomorrow.
be unveiling his
Yes,
prototype.
I
Perfect.
will be bringing it with me. I will be there from 6 p.m. till close.
Good. So if anybody out there watching wants to go play that,
Yeah,
Ryan would gladly welcome your input, I think.
yeah,
What's your
absolutely.
goal tomorrow night?
Well, my goal is just to make sure that the base mechanics are solid, just to make sure that people's vehicles are moving, they can get to where they need to be when they need to get there, to make sure that there's ample time to complete a crisis before another crisis replaces it. Because if two crises occur on the same tile, they're both discarded. Like you basically
Right. Okay.
failed.
Hmm.
Um, and if that happens too many times, the game ends. Whatever. So I just need to just balancing that. Just that's all I'm focusing on. I'm not worrying about broken combos or how much money people are getting. I just want to make sure that pieces are getting to be where they need to go
Hmm.
when they need to be there.
Okay. And so, are you willing to stop the game early?
You mean like while I'm
Like if people
playtesting
aren't,
it?
yeah, people aren't having fun. Are you willing to
Oh,
stop the game?
yeah. I mean, definitely. I think I'm not gonna. I would never. It's
Hey
obvious. You can
man,
read the table.
you would be amazed at how many people, get upset when I say, "I can we stop the game?"
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you mean when you say that as the person in charge or as a player?
No, no, as a player.
Okay. I can see people getting upset. Some people. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to put it. I don't want to offend anybody, but some people cling to like they love like this is their game,
Yeah,
and any even like slight discomfort is taken as an affront. But sometimes the game is just boring. I mean, it might turn out that this game is not fun to play.
right,
Like,
exactly, right.
and I might work on it for 6 months before I realize that it's really just not fun to play.
Hmm. It
I mean,
sounds like it has all the makings of something that's fun to play,
well,
but again, like you said, nothing will tell us until you put it on the
I
table in
mean,
front of
exactly. You
people who
can
are not married to you.
right. You can conceptualize, and everybody tells me, "Oh, it sounds like fun." I'm like, well, sounding like fun and being fun are two different things. So,
That's right. That's
I mean, I
entirely
just I hope it is fun and it's not. The thing I hate most. There's two things I hate in board gaming, and that's when one person can steamroll and get so far ahead you can't catch up,
right.
or when one person accidentally can fall so far behind that they wonder even why they're even playing the game anymore.
Right.
And I'd
Good,
love
good.
to avoid
Yeah.
both of those extremes.
Hmm. And I think that'll come out in the balance. The
Yeah.
balance is going to be key for the system you're thinking of, I think. So awesome. And Bob, when's your next playtest?
Uh, Next Saturday.
Okay, and who do you
Saturday.
playtest with?
Well, that's going to be, well, actually, I might do one before that. That's going to be the next year, the Unpub Mini in Richmond, Virginia again.
Okay.
So the game will be a year older and hopefully different.
Okay.
But
And so where is that, just for the people who are watching?
that is,
It's
I just lost it. It's at Battlegrounds in
at
Midlothian.
Battlegrounds in Richmond, Virginia.
Midlothian is sort of a suburb of Richmond, Virginia. That's right.
That sounds like very Tolkien-esque. It sounds like there should be orcs there.
Well, that's
Midlothian.
just I know, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
does, and there are, but they're friendly. And I've also got students and people at school that are sort of my captive audience that I can try stuff out.
Right. They pay their tuition, and you get to use them for playtesting. Awesome.
That's right.
Okay, so what are you hoping to get out of your next playtest? What is the area of focus for you?
The focus for me is going to be on this path of what's am I giving them a goal and giving them more than one way to get there?
Okay, so from tonight's conversation, just from tonight's conversation, you've already thought maybe I should try something. Okay, cool, cool,
Yeah.
cool.
And it's a little bit of a change from where I was going, which was I'm also concerned about because it's fully cooperative, about the alpha gamer issue of somebody just deciding that they're going to run the whole thing.
Good point.
But I'm gonna put that off. If somebody can figure it all out, then fine. I'll worry about that later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in all those shows, there are leaders and there are followers. Ryan, you got a point?
Well, no cooperative game has ever figured out a way to deal with that. Honestly,
Knobby kinda, and neither ones where you can't communicate quite what you have.
Yeah,
Kind of there, but even there, they're still kind of not. But
I would take a look at there's a new game, that Walking Dead No Sanctuary, that's coming out soon. They have, like, the person that's the leader, like there is a leader, like each turn there's a leader. So like that kind of mitigates the problem because it makes you be the leader. That way you kind of get to decide each turn like who's going to be the alpha gamer, because that's part of the game.
cool. All right, guys, it is 10 o'clock. Look at that. We ate up our hour, which is perfect. Just for people who are watching at home, the next episodes won't be quite as long because they will be focused on single designers. We're going to kind of draw straws later on to see who's on when, and we'll just follow that order. So every 4 weeks, the same designer will be on, and we'll just go through their problems. They'll have a month to iterate, get me some time to catch up on what they're doing in terms of their rules and their componentry and stuff like that. And so we'll be able to focus a little more intimately on each game design. And we'll meet Steve Kairez at some point in time soon as well. So from the Game Dojo, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's watching out there in YouTube land. Please, please, please ask questions on the feed. And thank you to Ryan, thank you to Devin, and thank you to Bob for joining us today on the feed. And we will have them back, and we'll announce the order so that if you are particularly on Team Devin, or you're particularly on Team Ryan or Team Bob, then you can come and watch on that night. And I'm sure they will also spread the good news. All right. So thanks very much. We'll see you all later, and say goodnight, guys.
Good night, guys.
And we'll talk to you all soon. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.